So the plan teachers and the crystal skull class. Yeah. So the plan teacher component is we're taking the different plans, and there's like 54 different plants that we're working with. And there's 60 oils total, but 54 of them are the plant teachers. And so this has to do with inspiration, the science of inspiration. And inspiration being that intuitive aspects come into the intellect or your normal everyday mind. A lot of times we have access to this, but we experience it in the intuitive state or intuition, but that it translates into something usable by the intellect sometimes doesn't happen. A lot of times it doesn't happen. And so with this, there's a lot of untapped potential in the intuition for the intellect, but you could just say that like the communication doesn't really happen. And so with this, you're tempering the intellect, and you're tempering the instinctive responses, and you're allowing intuition to do what it does and then begin to influence the body and the mind. But really, like, another way of saying it is, yes, intuition is starting to influence the intellect, but you're cultivating a state in the body. Like when you look at, like, oh, I get upset, I get angry, I have resentment. Yes, those are emotions. Yes, they're feelings, and eventually they cause like thought processes. But when we start to look at, like, what are the sources of this, right? You could look at the endocrine system, you could say parts of the nervous system, you could say parts of the physiology. But if you keep going deeper and deeper into what are the possible causes are the state of the body. Like if somebody is having like a lot of anger issues, for example, yes, you're experiencing feelings. Yes, you're experiencing emotions. Yes, you're starting to have thought processes. Yes, you get triggered by different situations. But if the state of the body was different, all that same stuff wouldn't land. The triggers wouldn't have the triggering effect. Even if the emotion came up, you'd go, oh, I'm a little bit upset. Uh, but, and then you would kind of process through it, right? And so a lot of times what we're dealing with is just the state of the body is in a place to where these emotions are able to rise, and it's like fertile ground. It's fertile ground for something negative to be happening. So even if you look at PTSD, you look at even things like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, part of that is, yes, there's a series of symptoms, but why it's so difficult to treat is, yes, there's some brain fatigue, and yes, there's different aspects that are manifesting in the body. But as much as you treat the symptoms, not a lot changes. You get some temporary relief, but then something else happens, and you go into a crisis again. And part of that is the state of the body. We talk about regeneration and degeneration. Those are aspects of the state of the body, but there's different kinds of states, right? And even the idea of loving kindness is a state of the body. Like what the Buddhists call as happiness is not an emotion, a feeling, it's not a behavior, it's not an attitude, it's not even a thought process. It's your body is in a state that then manifests as emotional well-being, that manifests in a way of thinking. You don't make the thought process happen. You create the state of the in the body, and then the things follow. And if you look at it like in the Christian tradition, how Christ talks about planting seeds, planting the different seeds and looking for fertile ground. The idea of the states of the body is tied to this fertile ground. Even if you look at the idea of the Ten Commandments, they're not just random rules that were laid out in the Christian tradition. Those Ten Commandments are tied to cultivating a state in the body, in the mind, that diminishes our suffering, that allows for a potential for us to be happy, to not cause degeneration internally. It's there to help us experience deeper spiritual states, deeper levels of healing. And so here we're looking at it with the plant teachers, and each plant has a special message that it's bringing from intuition into the intellect. And just inhaling the oils doesn't do it. You have to go through and do this combination of a process. My early experiences with this, it was done more in ceremony, you know, ceremony, and I would have to sit with the plants. I would have to go out. The medicine man would have me go out and sit with the plant. It was very time consuming. I'd have to go find it in nature, and then I would have to do this little ceremony, and then I'd have to sit with it for a while, and would gobble up a lot of a day. Now we have a way to do this very quickly, and the handful of people that I've had do it just recently, everybody has kind of come back to me at some point and said, whatever this is, it's profound. It's like, it's especially when you find the one that really matches your need at the moment, it is quite profound, right? And so this idea is, you kind of have like this master kit where you can go through, you can see the qualities of the different plants, and then you choose the one that feels like it meets your need, or it's something that you want to cultivate, right? So it's the science of inspiration. It's you could even call it the science of realization. And it basically makes you smarter. I mean, it just makes you a better problem solver, it makes you smarter, makes you able to heal things in a much faster way. Then the aspect of the crystal skull has to do with the purification of the five senses. Purification is not even the right way. You could say you're regenerating the five senses, because this is tied to our conditioning, and it's tied to the nervous system, and how we perceive our outer experiences is dependent on these five senses. And so in the Essene tradition, they have this thing that they do a practice where they say it's like an offering to the gods, right? In different traditions, they'll even talk about like offering up uh, like their animalistic nature, and it's tied to the senses are hardwired to your lower nature, and your lower nature is naturally resistant to higher consciousness or who you are. It's naturally resistant to the Buddha nature or the higher soul. And so we walk around with this like weird conflict all the time. And as much as we think these things that we'd like to bring into our life, these good things or good things about people, there's also part of us that is tied to this drive for survival and this drive to just identify with the lower nature. And as much as we try to undo it, the senses keep bringing us back to it. So in different traditions, they'll do like prayers and meditations and ceremonies where they sit and they look at the imagery of the skull. And in doing so, with the with the practices, they regenerate the senses so that it aligns more with who you truly are rather than what you've been conditioned to be. Right? And so even in the like the Buddhist tradition, we do this thing where we'll sit and meditate on the skull and then we'll pour holy water over the skull. And that's actually a very effective way to do it. But you can do it with plants, and I would say it's probably as effective, if not even more effective. And it's a way to refine our inner states, and it's a way to refine who we are on the inside so we can bring more of our genuine authentic self to the surface rather than the conditioned self, right? So it's really tied to you getting to be the best version of you that you can be. And we've laid the groundwork with the auric programming and working the aura and the vibrational state and the healing spirit. And this is a good companion class that goes with the healing spirit. And it's what I said during the healing spirit class. I said, like, that class and this class, like, if there was ever a couple of classes that where, like, if I sat and did it, I feel like I could be enlightened if I just spent enough time doing it. It would be this class and the healing spirit class. And so, um, think of the difficulties that you might be having in your life. And you're just like, God, I just can't seem to deal with it. I just can't seem to resolve this pattern. I just can't seem to get out of the funk of whatever this repetition is in my life, in my mind, in my behavior. Um, this is the remedy, you know. So, yeah.